The US-Iran war has entered its second week, with over a dozen countries affected. Turkey has so far remained on the sidelines of the conflict, despite being attacked twice by Iranian missiles. Turkey being attacked is a huge deal, not just because it is one of the most powerful countries in the region, but also because it is a NATO member. In fact, the target of Iran's missiles may have been in Incirlik Air Base in Adana, a NATO facility that houses thousands of US military personnel and even contains nuclear weapons. So far, Turkey has not invoked NATO Article 4 or 5 over these attacks. Doing so would force greater NATO involvement in the war, and could even, hypothetically, lead to boots on the ground. The reason why Ankara has held back is that it does not want the Iranian government to fall. Today, I'll discuss why that is. The first reason is an obvious one: refugees. Turkey has already taken in millions of people from the wars in Iraq and Syria who have crossed their shared borders. This includes over 4 million Syrians. Turkey's population is about 87 million, meaning over 4% of the population is made up of Syrians alone. This has caused major domestic challenges, turning refugees into a political battleground issue. There is also the humanitarian crisis that accompanies such massive movements of people. Turkey is undoubtedly worried that a regime change in Iran would create another failed state on its border, along with another refugee crisis, as potentially millions of Iranians flee the instability. And again, they share a border with Iran. Another reason involves the Kurds. The Kurds are the largest ethnic group in the world without their own state, divided across Turkey, Syria, Iran, and Iraq. Since the creation of modern Turkey, the country's Kurdish regions have been in chronic revolt. Since 1978, there has even been an insurgency led by the PKK, which now bases itself in Kurdish northern Iraq. Due to this history, Turkey views any form of Kurdish autonomy near its borders as a threat. And when is an ethnic group most likely to revolt? When the government they live under collapses. That's exactly what happened in Syria with Rojava. Iranian Kurds would likely attempt to form some kind of autonomous government if the Iranian regime collapses, possibly with support from Kurds in Iraq. US President Donald Trump has even discussed meeting with Kurdish groups there, whom he wants to launch a ground war with, possibly supported by US air power. That is yet to materialize, but remains a possibility. For Ankara, this scenario is a nightmare. Turkey has already had to tolerate Kurdish autonomy in Iraq due to US backing. If Iranian Kurds attempted something similar, Turkey would almost certainly intervene militarily, as it has done several times in Syria and Iraq. Turkey also faces an ongoing inflation crisis. 10 years ago, €1 equaled just 3.2 Turkish liras. Now it's 51. Since 2019 especially, inflation has become one of the country's biggest political problems, with much of the blame falling on President Erdoğan's poor economic policies. All you need to know is that the Iran war threatens to make the lira even weaker. Turkey relies heavily on imported energy, with about 14% of its oil coming from Iran. Higher prices will worsen the country's trade deficit, with one estimate suggesting that if oil hits $100 a barrel, which it already has, Turkey's deficit could rise to $60 billion. That would bring the current deficit to 4% of GDP, nearly double the government's 2026 forecast. Higher energy prices would also fuel new inflationary pressure. Current projections put the inflation rate between 19 and 21% for 2026. But if oil stays above $100 a barrel, that rate could rise towards 40%. It's safe to say that if you were a Turkish economist, you would oppose this war. And if you were Turkey's authoritarian leader, you'd turn down America's invitation to join it. The final and more long-term reason Turkey wants to avoid this war is the fear that Ankara could be next. Although a NATO member, Turkey's relationship with both the alliance and the US has been strained. Washington's favorite ally in the region is, of course, Israel. Tel Aviv has been clear about viewing Turkey as a regional rival. Just last month, former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said the following:
A new Turkish threat is emerging. I want to be very clear. Turkey and Qatar have gained influence in Syria, are seeking influence elsewhere and everywhere throughout the region. And from here, I warn, Turkey is the new Iran. Erdoğan is sophisticated, dangerous, and he seeks to encircle Israel. And while some senior Israelis were on Qatar's payroll, Qatar and Turkey are nourishing the Islamic Brotherhood monster that is growing and eventually might become as dangerous as the one created by Iran. Turkey and Qatar are gaining influence not only in Syria, but also in Gaza, through the front door, and everywhere, and trying to create a new choke ring. Turkey is trying to flip Saudi Arabia against us and establish a hostile Sunni axis with nuclear Pakistan.
These remarks were widely reported inside Turkey, with one commentator saying, quote, Israel needs a constant external threat to maintain internal unity and stay afloat. If Iran is no longer a threat, a new enemy is needed, and that enemy is us. It's reasonable to speculate that if Iran were removed from the equation through civil war or regime change, Turkey would become Israel's next regional rival. It's also worth noting that Erdoğan is a political opportunist who constantly plays both sides. While he portrays himself as a leader of the Muslim world, uses harsh rhetoric against Israel, and offers symbolic support for Hamas, he also oversaw the greatest period of growth in trade between the two countries in their shared history. Although Erdoğan likely does not want an outright conflict with Israel, the war with Iran could make such a confrontation more probable in the future, and that is something he would strongly prefer to avoid. If you made it this far, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, be sure to give a like and subscribe. And if there are any Turks that have made it this far, I just wanted to say marhaba, memnun oldum. I've made a fair few videos about Turkey. Really love the country, if you couldn't tell. And I'll definitely be making more in the future. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.